I think we all knew that Madam Web was going to be a box office failure even months before launch because every single teaser and trailer got absolutely destroyed by audiences. But now we are finding out just how poorly it did because Madam Web's box office has bombed with a measly 25.8 million opening. I have a few things to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube memberships. Now, there may be some of you saying, I wanted Madam Web to be good, and I don't want movies and pieces of content to be bad. I want them to be successful, but unfortunately, sometimes there are suits who greenlight projects that should have never been greenlit in the first place because they just think, hey, we want to make some money, and this movie is one of them. There is nothing with this film that makes sense. They decided to, of course, pick a younger actress to play Madam Web because they wanted a Hollywood bombshell, Dakota Johnson. That didn't end up working out. They picked Sydney Sweeney because she's, of course, a attractive younger actress. That didn't work out. None of these actresses really meshed well together. The writers that are on this project have had failure after failure after failure, like how the screenwriters have written things like Gods of Egypt, Power Rangers 2017. They also did The Last Witch Hunter. Like, we are talking about tons of losses under their belt, most notably Morbius as well. And this movie had an astounding 2,300 edits in it, and one of the producers of this movie was actually boasting about that in interviews, like, that's good, even though that is terrible. The record is actually 3,000, so they got up there. But now we're finding out that the box office was a complete and utter nightmare. The Madam Web box office has bombed big time with an estimated 25.8 million opening, and that is not for a 3-day standard weekend, that is for a 6-day weekend. In 6 days, there are movies that make $100 million easily. This movie should have done pretty decently, judging by, again, the budget, the cast, and it did not. And this is abysmal for them. It says the flick cost roughly $80 million to make, but Deadline is spinning things as usual, offering the underperforming box office is not the end of the world given Sony's rich international TV output deals and its Netflix deal. Movies still need to do well and make money in order to be considered a success. Of course, the media is going to try to spin this film in any way, shape, or form that they can to say it's not actually that big of a failure because Sony wasn't expecting this to do that well, but clearly that's not the case, or else they wouldn't have spent this much money on it. I mean, look at something like Morbius, right? Morbius had a $75 million budget, meaning that it was $5 million under Madam Web, and opening weekend it made $39 million, where Madam Web made $25 million. Now, of course, Morbius made $167 million worldwide in its run, meaning it just barely doubled its budget, but we know with movies they need to make some money on top of that double figure. Usually it's like 20 million over, so Morbius had only just gotten to the line where it could have started to make a profit, aka it broke even. Now, looking at Madam Web's budget, it needs to make roughly 180 million to start making a profit, and judging by its opening weekend, I highly doubt that's going to happen, seeing as it needed to make more than Morbius did. And keep in mind with Morbius, it released on a normal 3-day weekend where Madam Web's opening is counted as 6 freaking days. I mean, there really is no way to positively spin Madam Web at this point, and I don't think that there is going to be. I don't think that this movie is going to do great at the box office over the next few weeks for the rest of its run. I think that it is going to do terribly, and I don't think it's going to get anywhere near that probably roughly $200 million mark that Sony was really hoping for in order to, again, make a profit. IGN also started spinning the BS, writing up a joke of an article that Madame Web is destined to become a legendary sleepover watch. Do people actually read these shitty articles? I had to watch this once and I will never watch it again. This is truly one of the worst movies I have seen. It is right there with the Marvels. I really think that Sony created this movie to go directly against the Marvels, thinking, which female-led superhero flick can do worse? It was like a race to the bottom between these two movies because they both have just a mediocre cast of characters, awful scripts and writing, terrible editing. I mean, nobody behind these projects knows what people actually want out of superhero or comic book films, or just, I've got to be honest, films in general. And of course, not only is it doing terribly at the box office, but it is getting raked across the coals by critics and audiences alike, which is hilarious to see. The all critic is sitting at a 13%, top critic is sitting at a 15%, and usually I do not trust critic scores, which is why I wait to see what audiences have to say, and of course my own opinion on a piece of content before I judge it. And the verified audience is at a 55%, and the all audience is at a 43%, and I do think that these scores are slightly generous, but I also think that judging by the numbers at the box office, a lot of people are not actually going to see this movie, and it's really only a lot of, Spider-Man fans and comic book film fans, but also the people that are trying to push the girl boss narrative, and those are the types of individuals that are gonna rate it higher no matter how bad it is, because they don't care about the script, they only care about the narrative, unlike actual fans of Spider-Man content, who are definitely not gonna be happy with this movie because it doesn't really follow anything from canon from any of the Spider-Man universes. There are plenty of people giving it half stars and 1 stars, saying things like, I don't know how to say this nicely, but I want my time and money back and I regret watching this film. I think the story has many problems and plot holes, too much driving around, lack of interesting characters or villains, everything seems artificial and not very deep. Worst acting I've ever seen, sloppy script and sloppy CGI, puzzling and displeasing visuals, a cliche script that borders on cringe at times, and a disappointing climax, sink a potentially compelling character's origin story. So even people that are trying to give it the benefit of the doubt are saying it's just not a good movie overall, and it's hilarious to see this happen because I don't think many of us expected Madame Web to do, amazing at the box office or amazing with users, but I didn't ever think that it was going to be this horrendous and this awful, but it is. It's currently completely bombing at the box office, and it will be interesting to see by the end of its run how it actually ends up faring, if it gets to that point where it just starts to make a profit, or if it ends up staying in the negative the entire time. Only time will tell, but for now, that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.